We're back. And guess what? I get to introduce Dr. Tracy Straub. She
Uh-oh.
was the one doing all the introducing for a while there, but now it's me, folks. But you're getting the Tracy and Joe show. It's been on hiatus for a while. Dr. Tracy Straub, you need no introduction. Everybody knows who you are, but she is a pioneer in this industry because she is the freedom fighter in our industry. And I'm just going to leave it at that because that's our topic today. And, Dr. Weiner, the Weiner Wellness Week, he was a pioneer of medical freedom. Well, now the mantle has been taken up on a state and maybe even a national level by our own Dr. Tracy Straub. Morning.
Hello. I'm just sharing this to my timeline so everybody can tune in because this is a really important topic. I hear all
Yes.
the time, how did we get here? How did we get here? Honestly, Joe, I can't replace the icon, Dr. James Weiner. I mean, he was cool before, this whole let's take a stand was cool. He fought tyranny. He was amazing. So I just want to give him credit and give Jamie and everybody at the World of Wellness credit for carrying that mantle forward. That's not an easy thing to do, especially today, because it comes with such high restriction.
Right.
But today, regardless of what the meme said, we're going to talk about the 1986 Act, not the 1096 Act, which was kind of like, after Jesus came. And so we're not going to talk about that. But the 1986 Act, which many people don't understand what it is, and the question of how did we get here? How did we get here
Mhm.
where people are losing their jobs because they're refusing an experimental jab, where children are being masked from 7 to 3 p.m. because that's when viral infections are, most threatening. How did we get here? How did we get to a place that, oh, you know what? Yeah, we're just going to take away all your parental rights and freedoms, and you just have to do what we say and don't question the science and don't question the powers that be. And it started way, way long ago. It wasn't just something that happened. This started way long ago, probably in the 1930s, when we had the entire onset of, the discovery of the polio vaccine and moving forward. So I had the absolute pleasure of talking with Dr. Andy Wakefield. And I'm going to give him and his team, Lori, 100% credit on everything you'll hear today. They did an incredible documentary series called The Act 1986. I don't know if your team is there. Hi, Kathy. If you can drop that in the chat, it's called The Act 1986. I would suggest everybody that hears this stream goes there and downloads that documentary. If you want to know how to move forward, if you want to know how to stop tyrannical overreach, you need to know how we got here. So I texted him the other day and had the pleasure of talking to him on a Sunday morning for about 2 hours. And we went through this entire documentary together. What were the points that were most important and what can we do moving forward? And the biggest thing that we can do is know our rights, the laws, and what we can do as a society to never end up here again. So that's really what I want to talk about today. What this act is, how we got here, and that whole host of events. Hang on a second. Sorry, I have to get my dog out of the way. But this whole host of events that we really need to look at and make sure that we're okay. Joe, take over a second.
Okay. Well, the 1986 Act, and I'm sure that Tracy's going to give us all the details, but, I first heard about it by following Robert Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy Jr. And when I found out about it is when he had launched a lawsuit against the federal government.
I'm back.
And, he couldn't fight them on certain things, but you know what he fought them on and won? Fraud.
Well,
He
that's it.
won.
Yeah, because I'm going to talk about that. Let's just talk about that really quick. Robert Kennedy, in case people don't know, he is a pioneer in all this. He has a new book out called The Real Anthony Fauci.
I have it.
I have it. I listen to it on audio and then I read it at the same time because truly it's just so much information.
It's so much.
So you guys got to get it. It's #1 bestseller. And it was just, it's such an amazing read. So let's just start at the beginning. One of the first pioneers in this whole movement was Barbara Loe Fisher. She has a book called Shot in the Dark. She started the National Vaccine Information Center. That is where you can get all the information about vaccinations, all of that. And she did that because her son reacted to the Tdap, the pertussis vaccine. And actually, for 50 years prior to that incident, there had been reports, doctors and pediatricians writing about this vaccine saying there are dangers, there are issues, we shouldn't put it out. And so everyone's always like, well, why can't they make a safe vaccine? Well, in fact, in 1937, they actually had the patent to make a safer vaccine, but it didn't matter. So they released this Dtap vaccine, and it comes out and it has this issue that's going on. And so, Barbara Loe Fisher, she comes forward and she starts speaking out about it, saying, we need to be informed as parents. We need to know that our children can be damaged by these vaccinations. So she was really one on the cutting edge that was one of the first to speak out about vaccine injury, and that her son had been injured. Also to, just have more information about, what we can do as parents. So Dr. Julius Younger and Jonas Salk, which you may have heard of, they were the inventors of the polio vaccine. Mm-hmm. And what happened with that, and this is what people always say, well, I have to vax my kids. What about polio? If you know the history of polio and what happened and how we got to an epidemic of it, you would really probably reconsider what the safety is. So Dr. Julius Younger invented the polio vaccine. He sent it out with these strict 4 criteria of how to do it, how to encapsulate it, and how to administer it. And what had happened was he found out that there were some labs, a significant amount of labs, that were not following his procedures, and they were getting contaminated polio vaccines and they were administering them. And what was happening was children were becoming paralyzed. And then, Bernie Eddy from the National Institute of Health actually started to do a study on these labs and was injecting this polio vaccine into monkeys. And she found the same results, that these monkeys were becoming paralyzed. So Dr. Younger went to Jonas Salk and said, hey, we need to send these labs a letter and let them know that these vaccines are contaminated, that they're administering, and they need to be pulled. Well, Jonas Salk was like, hey, I'm more well-known than you. Let me write the letter. Well, he never wrote the letter. And when Bernie Eddy tried to turn in her research about these contaminated variants, they completely ignored her. So the result of that was there was 400,000 polio infections from that cross-contaminated vaccine. 200,000 children were paralyzed, and some died. So this was a man-made polio epidemic from a cross-contaminated vaccine, and they knew it. So on April 26, 1955, there was a little secret meeting held about what to do, and they decided that in order to keep, they would pull the one vaccine from the one exposed lab, but all the other ones were kept secret. And they decided that losing confidence in vaccination protocols was more harmful than the 200,000 children that would be paralyzed.
So, doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. So it was American politics at the time. We were kind of in war with this whole vaccine takeout. It was going to give us status around the world. And basically we were in competition with Russia. And if we would have pulled vaccines off the market and looked like the fools, Russia would have taken over. Plus, it was a way for them to get biochemical warfare in place. So that's kind of the history of polio. The other thing that came out from the polio vaccine was the Simian virus, the Simian virus 40, which we now know is linked to several cancers. And what happened was, by the 1960s, 98 million Americans were vaccinated with this polio vaccine. And for us to tell them that SV40 was going to cause cancer, that kind of was squashed too. So you have this whole history that's moving up of vaccine confidence. We don't want to lose confidence. And then we had in 1976, the swine flu. And we had this big epidemic come out. They created a vaccine for that. The result was Guillain-Barré. There was 532 paralysis. There was 58 people that died. They ended up pulling it off the market. But the interesting thing, Joe, was it wasn't the same flu that they were categorizing it as. And in fact, in Fort Dick, there was only 4 cases of the actual Spanish flu that they were constituting was going to be this big next epidemic. So there was really no proven cases that it was going to be an epidemic. They rushed a vaccine to market. It damaged people. And it ended up $220 million in taxpayer dollars for damages. So Guillain-Barré made its way through, and it became one of the vaccine injuries on the inserts. So lots of little lies out there about how we got here. So you got to know the history.
Well, and I'm going to throw this out there. One of the other big lies that even predates that is the whole 1918 epidemic.
Right.
And there's a lot of information out there that was caused by a meningitis vaccine, bacterial meningitis vaccine. It first started on the soldiers, and when they ran out of them, they went to the general public.
That's
So
right.
that's another whole story. But yeah, it was very similar to what's going on.
Yeah. So here we are. We have this pressing issue of like parents starting to question the science. We have a government, recommendation for vaccine. We have states mandating vaccinations. And in 1982, there was the whole movement of no vax, no school. And the product manufacturers knew that they were at risk because the parents were rising up demanding to see the research. They were rising up and taking these vaccine companies to court. Well, the worst thing that you can do is have to open your records in the court of law, because then it's on the record for public knowledge. So most of the deals of vaccine injury were done on the stairs of the courts. The products manufacturers, they would not want to be exposed. They have to get to what's called a discovery junction. And if people knew they were unsafe at this time, that they knew that Dtap was unsafe, they knew that the polio was unsafe, and they released it anyway, there would have been a huge issue with, vaccine confidence. So what the manufacturers started to do was go to Congress and say, hey, we want liability taken off of us. Like, we can't keep doing this. And if you don't do it, then what's going to happen is, we're just going to take our processes elsewhere to other places and other countries and not here. And you're going to have no inoculations for your kids, and all the money is going to go to another place, not you. And so, it was almost like hey, if you don't give us what we want, we're leaving. I'm taking my ball and going home, is basically what happened. So that's basically how it went. And then, the guy that wrote the 1986 Act, or the exemption from liability, he literally pushed the president by putting out a public statement basically saying, like, if you don't sign this, you are risking the health of the whole world. And so Reagan signed it into law in 1986.
Yeah.
So that point, all these groups that were fighting for kids.
It still sounds all so familiar. It keeps going on. It happens. It's happening now. The same exact scenario. I mean, incredible. But, okay, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but the whole reason behind Bobby Kennedy's lawsuit was that he didn't sue them, for damages. He didn't sue them for, adverse. He sued them for fraud because they said they're safe. And they couldn't say that because they hadn't done a single safety study in the 32 years since 1986 when he filed his lawsuit.
Correct.
And that's why he won.
Well, that is actually one of the things. So what happened were all these groups that were fighting to keep these manufacturers at bay, to keep their children safe, they basically went to them and said, listen, this legislation will pass. So you can come to the table and you can tell us what you want, because we are passing this. So they did. So they went and they did it. In the 1986 Act, which Harry Waxman was the one that really pushed it forward, these groups came in and they said, we want compensation for injured children. And we want it immediately. So there's what's called on-table compensation, Joe, and off-table. The second thing was they wanted legal protection. The manufacturers wanted legal protection over liability. However, there was still a criteria that said to these manufacturers that you have to do safety tests and you have to do a study on vaccinated versus unvaccinated children, right? So when Robert Kennedy sued them, he sued them because they never did the required safety testing and turn it in every 2 years since the implementation of the 1986 Act, and he won. But what happened? Nothing. Nothing
Yeah.
happened. So we
It wasn't even reported on in this country. I had to
because
get the news story from Australia.
that's right, because the DOJ buried it.
Yeah.
So while they won in court, the Department of Justice went, rah, rah, we're not even going to talk about it. We're not even going to talk about it. And so nobody knew. And so the 1986 Act was to do two things. It was one, protecting the manufacturers from liability for their product that they knew. I mean, there's so much in the Act, the 1986, the Act that Andy Wakefield did. You have to go download it. Just go to 1986, the Act. And it is, I mean, it's $9, guys. It is so worth it. It's 2 hours long. It's amazing to follow. Watch it again. It's awesome. But the Department of Health, the Homeland Security, the CDC, they all opposed compensation. They hated that part of the act because they didn't want to admit that there was damages. So these parents fought for what was called on-table injuries. This meant if your child got a vaccine at as a specified injury, let's say encephalitis or whatever, at a specified period of time, right? So they gave these specifications. If that injury happened in that time period, and because of that, or if the vaccine was determined ineffective or inadequately researched, you were entitled to immediate compensation. You won your case. The only thing they had to talk about was how much money. That was it. So what happened then was the on table, up until 1996, autism was included in that. And then what happened was the on-table injuries were taken off by Donna Shalala, who was a defendant in vaccine court. She's the one that defended the vaccines, but she was also in charge of the DHHS at the time, and she red-penned out all of the on-table injuries, things like encephalopathy, anything that related to brain swelling, seizures. So now all of these things that led up to a diagnosis of perhaps autism, and the CDC actually proved that in a study they did later but never released it, became off-table. And off-table injuries you have to prove were because of the vaccine. So the 1986 Act protected manufacturers with criteria that Bobby Kennedy found like they didn't do and he sued them for. It gave compensation to kids that were on-table injuries that Donna Shalala red-penned out and made off-table. And then it required these certain safety studies, which have never been done. And so that's how we kind of got here. It was to try to make the vaccine safe and effective. That's what these lobbying groups that these parents were coming in saying, you have a level of protection, but our kids need some. So the act that was put in place, and honestly, the first year it worked great. Mike Hugo was one of the attorneys that, took these kids to court and won for them. He said he won 92% of the cases, just like that. And then it got expensive. And then they started red penning all this stuff. So the act that's in place now was not the original act that was put into place and signed into law. It's very different. It's been lobbied to be changed. And we have to understand that the pharmaceutical industry has the largest lobbying group than all other lobbying groups in Congress combined.
I know that. Yes.
So the other thing was the specified period of time. Any injury that your child gets from a physician, a procedure, a medication from birth to 18 years, you can be compensated. Anything. So if something happens in the hospital, up until that child is 18 years old, you can take that to court and be compensated, except for vaccinations. You get 3 years. It usually takes 2 to get a diagnosis, maybe 3. And by the time the parent figures out what it was, they're outside the statute of limitations for compensation on injury. So this is where we are. This is how we got here. It is a sad state of affairs. It's unfortunate, but the 1986 Act needs reformed. we can't get rid of it because they'll put something worse in its place. But we really need to start looking at, how do we reform this? How do we
Mhm.
make this better? And that is really the push. And it really starts with
Now,
awareness.
is there anybody that's taking up that mantle to reform this act?
Well, it's been tried a few times. I know that Dr. Wakefield has testified in front of Congress. We've heard about the CDC whistleblower, Dr. Thomas. He actually recanted later and tried to take down Brian Hooker, who was the PhD scientist that he told about the study that they falsified. And Brian Hooker, actually, if you go to the children'shealthdefense.org, there is a
Mhm.
study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children.
Yes,
And
I've seen
that
that.
study is incredible. And
Mhm.
actually, in the 1986 Act, they were to do that study and they never did it, which is why Robert Kennedy won. Long story short, when Brian Hooker and his team put that out, what they found was a significant difference in vaccinated versus unvaccinated children in their health.
Mhm.
First,
Mhm.
almost no chronic disease in unvaccinated children, almost no ear infections, no skin issues, no autism. Like, the results were astronomical, and it
Mhm.
flipped the industry on its head. But of course, nobody ever heard about it.
Right.
So we have to be such detectives. And what came out of all of this awareness in the 1986 Act was the vaccine adverse effects reaction, right? VAERS. That's what came out. And so, what they found through the CDC's own study, which was never released, they produced an injury result so high from vaccinations that they never released the study. They actually stopped it.
Hmm.
um, the CDC, because they knew that what they were producing and what they were doing was so damaging that the reporting to VAERS was only 1% that they found, and of the 1%, the injuries were catastrophic. Of all the people that have received vaccines, only like 2.6% have reported their injuries. So it's really tough to get a real time statistic on
Mhm.
vaccine injuries. And the VAERS system was supposed to be put in place for ease of use. And to fill out a form that a medical professional has to do would take 3 hours of all records and indications. And that's not what was supposed to be put into place. What was supposed to be put into place was an automated reporting so that a physician could do it within 5 minutes. What doctor has time? And here's an interesting thing, because I have a friend who is a pediatrician who is very open, and she is wonderful. And we had a very open conversation about, what does it look like in med school when pediatricians are being taught. And she said that the VAERS reporting system is equated to the lady who spilled the coffee on herself at McDonald's and got compensated $2 million. Well,
Oh
Joe,
boy.
here's how God works. Okay. I'm not going to say any names of who it was, but a very close person that I know, love, and trust actually knows the attorney who defended that woman. And so, from the attorney's mouth, they said McDonald's was warned prior to this incident that their coffee was extremely hot, scalding, because it had happened a few times before. This
Mhm.
lady actually took them to court and won. And because of the statute that the judge put out, he couldn't change what that company did. But what he did say was, if you show up in my court again for this same injury, I will not do just 10%. So the judge ruled in that woman's favor that she got 1 day's profit of coffee sales worldwide. That's it. What, 10%? He only gave her 10%. It was $2 million. That's how much coffee they sell. Said to them, he said, if you come back in my court, it'll be 20. If I see you again, it'll be 30. He said, until that. So the statute was set. This is the kind of thing we need for injuries. We need a judge to say, if someone shows up in my court again with the same injury, with the same vaccine, it's going to be more money and more money and more money. We can't change their policies and how they produce these things, but we can change the outcome. It just takes people to stand up. And so when medical professionals are taught that injuries are normalized, that they're part of baby's growth, when parents who are reporting to a system put into place to protect them are considered dumb or dumbed down in a medical professional's training, how is that medical professional supposed to come out and know? And they don't. And so it's about re education and getting rid of our egos and being open to listening to the history of how we got here. What is the established law? Why was it put into place? Why was it changed? And we all need to lay that stuff down and start over. This is not about our careers. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about children. It's about kids that are being damaged by these things and not being protected and not being compensated. We have 1 in 35 kids autistic today. They will become adults. What happens to them when they're adults? Who takes care of them? Where's the compensation after they're 18 years old? What happens? What happens to these parents that are waking up saying, wait a second, I think this might have been from this thing, and they can't go back because they only get 3 years. Why are we torturing and tormenting these parents? Why are we not protecting these children? Why are we not looking together saying, you know what, something's wrong. Something's wrong and we need to do better. Why?
Because the profits for the pharmaceutical companies outweigh all of this.
Mhm.
That's why. There it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about that, right? Because in the 1986 act of the movie that Andy Wakefield did, he talked about the Pinto Effect. Did you ever hear of that? Where Ford
No.
Motor Company, they
Oh,
created
yes.
the Pinto, and it would explode when someone rammed into the back of it. And what happened was Ford made a decision, an internal memo that said it's going to cost us more to fix that gas tank. That would have cost $11 a gas tank. That would have been $137 million. Then to pay compensation for injured people, which would have cost them $50 million. 900 and what was it? Over 900 people died. They burned to death in those cars. And they made a business decision. So when you talk about that, what they found when they opened up the boxes, when Mike Hugo took one of these vaccine companies to court and got the discovery, there were 87 boxes laid in that court, and he said he opened one. And when he opened it, the very first thing he took out was what was called a risk-benefit analysis on vaccines and injuries. And it would have cost this particular vaccine manufacturer $1 million not to kill kids, to make the vaccine safer, but it would only have cost them $500,000 if they just left it out on market. So they left it out on the market. And basically, we had a 6,000% hike increase in price, or a hike increase in liability for Congress. So the injury compensation, they just looked at kids and were like, it's a business choice. Like, we either want to pay $500,000 or $1 million. Do we want to pay the $1 million and keep the vaccine safe and these kids safe and do better? Or do we want to pay 500,000 and not? And they chose 500,000 and not. Your children's health has come down to less than a penny per child. Less than a penny. That is what they think your children are worth. That's disgusting.
Yes, it is disgusting.
So it makes me sad.
It's compounding, Tracy. It's compounding. I mean, you're at this point, through this whole half an hour, you've only been talking about the basic childhood inoculations, right? Vaccines, whatever you want to call them. Not the addition of this new one, this thing out there, and this new jab that they're trying to impose on kids. I mean, this whole half an hour has only been on what's come before.
Right.
And now it's repeating. Now it's coming back. Now it's amplifying. If VAERS only has a 1% reporting rate, what's the latest count? Was it 22,000 deaths reported? I think.
Of the experimental one, or
Yes.
So the experimental jab has more injuries and deaths than all childhood vaccines combined. To date, since the reporting happened. Last time I looked,
And that's only 1%.
Yeah.
of the actual events.
Right. Because they're
Right.
telling you, I mean, honestly, the meme that's going around, please don't normalize myocarditis like autism. Autism is not genetic. How can you
No.
say that when there hasn't ever been cases of that prior to the 1980s? I mean, genetics is usually means generational. Hello, that's what the term means. How
Hmm.
many autistic people do you know that were your grandmother's age? None. It's brain swelling leading to seizures, and they actually did a study on that. What they found, and here's when they couldn't hide it anymore. Dr. John Poling was a pediatric neurologist. I think he was at John Hopkins. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember. And his daughter, Hannah, was vaccinated and became autistic. And so he went out and he's like, why did this happen? And he found that it was a mitochondrial dysfunction in his daughter, that when she received the vaccine, started to have seizures, started to have brain swelling, and became autistic. That was his findings, along with Dr. Zimmerman. And they looked at 1,200 other cases and found the exact same thing. So it tells us that when you have a mitochondrial dysfunction, when you're not getting enough ATP due to whatever, maybe MTHFR mutation, maybe COMP mutation, I don't know, depends, right? Maybe you just have low methylation from lack of sleep, from a poor diet, from stress. Maybe
All
it's
of the above.
all the above, right? You have low methylation, you get these jabs, you get a vaccine, and boom, you get seizures, you get brain swelling, you become autistic. And you know what? Is that the whole thing is really disheartening, because all they have to look at is mitochondrial dysfunction. All they have to look at is, do these kids have some sort of issue with methylation? Is there a genetic mutation? But they don't test for that. They don't tell you. So literally, you have to understand what you're getting into. First, are there safety tests on these? No, there's not. There's never been a vax versus unvax safety test done by the powers that be that absolutely should have and were supposed to do it. They didn't do it. Number two, is your child at risk? Why not find out? Why don't we have insurance policies that test these kids for mitochondrial dysfunction prior to vaccination? The other thing that Andy Wakefield discovered that he got crucified for was the time, was when vaccines were given.
Oh.
And so Pauling's own daughter, he went back and was like, something is wrong, right? And what Wakefield and his team did was basically said, listen, if you delay the inoculations just a bit, go wait for a year after, you're going to have less issues with it, less injuries
Hmm.
with it. Nobody wanted to hear that. Why not delay? Why not say, okay, the blood brain barrier is closed, let's start then? Like, but no, they don't do that. So we had all of these things that nobody ever hears of. And everyone's just like, don't question it. I mean, now it's the whole like love your neighbor if you don't get an experimental jab, when the jabs that are on the market are not even safe. They're not safe.
Oh my God. I don't know. Where do we go from here, Tracy? Where do we go from here? I mean, look, Bobby Kennedy, I mean, he's done everything he could possibly do. In fact, his family had vaccine injuries, right? And that's why he launched this. I mean, this guy is a liberal Democrat who launched this crusade. He's not from the right, he's not a conservative, but he experienced this. And he is a human being who wants the people to come first and not the money to come first. But the other thing that just drives me crazy is the acceptance. What happened to us as a people that blindly accepts this?
Well, we have been indoctrinated not to question the science. You go to your pediatrician's office now, they can kick you out. Like, when are we going to take a stand, y'all? When are we going to take back the industry that was first ours. The original medicine was not allopathic, it was God given and created. So they have no rights over it. They've created synthetic pathways of pharmacology and inoculations that bypass the natural God given immune system that actually works. And we've seen that with the recent pandemic. We've seen people survive it 98.9% of the time. It was only the people that they put out on the news that made it look like this big death crisis, because we now know that the protocols that they were putting upon people were not helping. They were actually hurting people. And just to clarify, Robert Kennedy, Judy Mikovits, all of those people, even Andy Wakefield, I mean, they're not anti-vaccine. They're asking for
That's
safer
right.
pathways. They're
That's correct.
asking for us to care about these children. They're
Yes.
asking our government officials to care, to actually step up, step in, take the money out of your pockets that you're getting, because you know what? It's blood money. It's blood money. Don't take it anymore. Stand up for our kids. We need people to stand up for our kids. We, the parents, need to actually stand up and stop this. And so, yes, you ask, what should we do? Go to your legislatures, educate them, buy the 1986 Act DVDs, send it to them, send them the information, all of these documents in the Act 1986 website. All of these documents are available, every study, all of it. You can just download a whole binder full of things that they have put on there as resources. It's an amazing site. You have to go to it. Start educating yourself. Stop just saying yes. Stop saying things like, oh, love your neighbor and get it. No, you want to love your neighbor? Speak the truth. That's how you love your neighbor, even if it hurts. You can be kind, you can be loving, but tell them the truth. They have been lied to from an industry that has covered up so many things. Guys, all the world is deceived by pharmakia. It's not that it's not strategic in ways and that we don't need it. And doctors aren't the bad guys. They've just been educated poorly. And it's on their responsibility to start educating themselves. So we have to take responsibility as parents to not be afraid to be standing out and standing up and be different. Our kids will be hated, and the unpopular opinion, meow, 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 that everybody says, I don't want to start trouble. Start some trouble. Start some trouble, right? Because it's your right. It's not
Yes.
only is it your right, but you'll stand before God one day as your covenant, as the parents of those children. It's your covenant before God. You want to stand before God one day and be like, well, I just didn't want to start any trouble. No, I don't want to do that. I want him to look at me and be, well done, good and mighty servant. That's what I want to hear. The second, it's our government who works for us. We don't work for you. And
Oh,
doctors, you work for us. We don't work for you. So we get to fire
yes.
you. So fire your
They're
pediatrician.
public servants. What does
That's
that mean?
right. So we have all of this stuff. It's backwards. Our whole industry is backwards. And I don't mean anything against allopathic model or doctors. There are great doctors out there. There are doctors that advocate for their patients. We just need more of them. And you know what? The unfortunate thing is they get beat up. They get their license taken away. They don't get compensated. I mean, it's like they're going to work for free if they open their mouth. That's not fair.
Mhm.
We need to change the
No.
industry above them. Let's go after the insurance companies. Stop buying insurance. It's a racket where you paid $700 for no preventative care, right? And a reactive system that is disease management versus healthcare. Stop that.
Yes.
Go get involved in Christian, insurances that you pay into, and they'll actually pay for things like services at World of Wellness. Save money. Use your HSA and buy supplements for people to take it. If you're a practitioner, get involved with that stuff. Like, you need to help your people be more strategic. It is expensive to take care of ourselves. And look at food prices now. Look at gas prices. You think they're raising prices on stuff that's bad for you? No, you go buy organic grass-fed beef, it's $10 a pound. Right? You go buy a Skittles pack or a Snicker bar, it's $1.69. What are you going to buy if you're low income? How are you going to feed your children? What do these government assistant programs pay for? Crap. They pay for crap because there's no money in healthy people. There's no money in healthy people, none. All right, I'll calm down now.
Don't. I like this. Don't calm down. Yeah. Well, I want to after you take your breath, I
Mhm.
want you to I have seen you on a few platforms. Are you pursuing anything
I've had
politically on
discussions.
a state basis?
You know what? I always say I'm not qualified. I,
That's a
I,
bunch of crap.
the
You're
whole thing,
qualified.
I'll go wherever God tells me to go. However, I do speak for a couple of groups. I didn't ask them for permission to speak about them here, but later on, if I think Ken's watching, if he wants to say, go ahead, I will. I am involved with a grassroots Unite PA program that was put together by the pediatrician I talked about, who is wonderful. She's awesome. Love her. Her husband and her have been so discriminated against for helping people. My friend Ken, who has a great organization called Lions for Liberty. It came out of Penn State University to go against the mandates. Great organization to follow, especially if you're being discriminated at the workplace level and student place level.
Can we get all those links on here, Phil?
Yes, I'll make sure that I send them to Phil. But the other thing is we come together as this PA Grassroots Unite group and brought together a bunch of PA groups under one umbrella, not as an organization, just as a safe space to communicate. We've done several events. We're doing an event at the Capitol on March 28th, where we're allowing people to speak out about medical mistreatment. We are, doing all kinds of events. We just had one in Hershey and one in State College. Dr. Peter McCullough spoke for us. Dr. Brian Artis, Steve Kirsch, Tom Rentz was in.
Wow. Artis, McCullough on one.
It was a great event. Like, it sold out. We live streamed it. You can get the playback, and I'll put the link where you can follow the Rumble page for that.
Okay.
But people are rising up. It's the silent majority that needs to get louder. You guys have to stop being afraid and get involved with these groups. And if you want involved in any way, shape, or form, just reach out to me here. I'll make sure that I get you involved. The other thing is talk to your legislators. You know what, guys? Like, they just don't know. They don't. When I talked to a few senators and I sent them the Flexner report and I talked about the 1986 Act, they're blown away. They don't know these acts. They don't know they're in place. One of the candidates, Lieutenant Governor, he's wonderful. I've talked to him a couple of times. So we have to really get involved with our politicians, not be afraid, and think that it's not our place. It's totally your place. If you're a parent, if you're a person on the planet, this is your place. This is your government. And you have every right to talk to your legislators. And I'll tell you what, they are so open. I texted one representative and I said, hey, we're having this event. One lady wants to talk to you. How do I get her in touch? Do I put her in touch with your secretary? She's like, no, here's my cell number. Her cell number. Like, I was like, now that's a representative of the people and for the people. Same thing with another senator that I know, like Mastriano. I appreciate him. He is for the people, and he's always available, always. So Stephanie Burowitz, another one, great woman. So these are our representatives are out there. There are good people there. I know some of them are tainted. I get it. But others aren't. And it's not Republican or Democrat, guys. There's a lot of Democrats that are just like, hold the phone. They're trying to divide us to say this is, blue and this is red and this is Democrat and this is Republican. No, this is people. This is people, and people need information, and you give them the right information and you have a discussion and you have the hard talks that hurt, that, that may go against what you believe. Have those. Listen to parents. If you're a physician, listen to them. Don't brush them off, even if that's what you were trained and taught to do. Listen to them. Nobody knows their kid like a mom or a dad or the guardian over that child. If you're a representative, listen. Give your number out. Let people come to the table with you. Have these round tables that we're seeing all these senators do. It's amazing. Senator Mastriano had a roundtable panel discussion with McCullough, Artis, Kirsch, Rentz, and Dr. Chamini Wheeler at the Capitol building last week. What was it, 2 weeks ago? I don't know. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. Or Friday morning, 9 o'clock. It was amazing. Open discussion, questions from the public, just like Senator Ron Johnson did. That's what we need. We need people to stop being scared, that somehow the big bad government's going to get us. Like, what are we talking about?
They're going to get us, or they're going to protect us.
Yeah, that too.
Right?
Well, there are people in government that want to. We just have to get to them and express what kind of protection we need. And, there are groups rising up that can help you navigate this. It's really hard to navigate it. It's really hard to know where to go, what your rights are. Today, I received a form from the school. It's a very common form. It says, hey, if you're going into 7th grade, you got to get your meningitis inoculation in
I
your.
saw your post. Yes.
So, without, it's a school thing. They send it out. But you know what it didn't say? That your updated medical records also include in the state of Pennsylvania an exemption form that you as the parent can sign. You as the parent, it is your constitutionally state protected right, which trumps any federal constitution. That's the power of the state. And
So Tracy, hold on a second. This exemption, so you don't need a medical, you don't need a religious. You have one guaranteed already by our state.
it's a law under the Pennsylvania state constitution that says medical, religious, or strong philosophical belief against. You can just
Okay.
not want to do it as a
Yeah.
parent because guess what? That's your kid. That's your kid. Now, there's only 3 states that require vaccinations. California, big shocker there, Mississippi, and West Virginia. They require vaccines and don't give exemptions beyond medical. Okay. And not a lot of doctors will give a medical exemption on a vaccination because, again, they get crucified if they do. But in the state of Pennsylvania, the law states that we have medical, religious, and strong philosophical. So we can sign that form as a mom and dad, and you just staple it to your school form and you hand it in. But it doesn't say on this form that that is one of the accepted pieces of documentation. It just says in their word salad, appropriate documentation for meningitis and Tdap immunizations needed. Well, appropriate documentation is a vaccine exemption in the state of PA. So people have to know your rights, know your rights, know your rights. It's so important. Go pick up that Constitution again. Go pick up your state constitution. Read your Pennsylvania school code. That's how I got around a lot of the mask policies that were happening. I knew the code. I was like, nah, we don't have to listen to them. Nope. There's nothing in the Pennsylvania school code that says we have to listen to the Department of Health. They have no jurisdiction over us. Right. And so what happened was the solicitor didn't know constitutional law, educational law, but didn't know constitution. And then what happened? Pennsylvania State Supreme Court ruled and said this was unlawful from the beginning. No kidding. Duh. Like, I was like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is not lawful. And everyone's like, wow, our solicitor is saying, your solicitor needs to go get another job. So anyway, yeah, I'm not sure how we got the mask, but anyhow, this is all the things of how we got here is basically, I would say, we just sat back and believed, we trusted. I think the 80s really brought that on, was this, trust of government and not questioning. And then when we started questioning, then you were a conspiracy theorist. And I love the meme where it says, not that this is a competition or anything, but the conspiracy theorists are winning 16-0.
I saw that.
So if you question vaccines, you were anti-vax automatically, rather than being pro-science and pro-scientific method of like, hey, the scientific method was put in so that we could measure the validity, effectiveness, and safety of these things. Let's run it by that. And people were like, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer. No, I'm pro-science. I'm always pro-science. And so that's why when we saw the most recent documentation that Pfizer didn't want to release about the vaccine injuries for 70 years.
Right.
How many injuries? And you know what? What happened? When that document got released, all of a sudden we were at war. So we can't look at this over here. Now everyone's over here looking at war. Not that war is wonderful or anything. It's an awful thing, but the documentation is still out on the injuries on that. So we need to go find that, right? Where is it? Where can you find it? Did they announce it? Was it on CNN? Did they say, hey guys, the new study's out done by Pfizer, which constitutes like 300 injuries from these vaccines. Congratulations. No one saw that.
Well, the one I saw that was released was that there were, out of 45,000 in the trial, 42,000 people, 42,000 out of 45,000 suffered adverse effects.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. So that's a little statistically significant, if don't you think?
It's amazingly significant that no one ever heard of. So that's the thing. Like, we have to start being louder and sharing the truth. And nobody wants to be that person. Well, I don't want to get into a fight with my parents. No. I mean, people like sneak text me like, hey, what do you think about, this? I don't want to tell blah, blah, blah that I'm choosing not to vaccinate my kids. I'm like, why? It's your constitutionally protected right. It's also your God-given right to be the parent over
As a
that
parent,
person.
yes.
Yeah, there's so many. So, hey, Phil, you got hackers coming in on your text messages. Take them out. So, yeah, it's just really important that
What
we do have hard
are those?
conversations. Oh, they're just spamming people. You can block them.
Oh,
Block them, Phil.
okay.
Um, but I mean, all of this information, again, the act 1986.com, go there, download, buy the DVD, all of the things, like really amazing. The amount of research information, the documentary that he put together. He's also doing another movie. It's coming out, and he has other things on there that are
Mm-hmm.
really, he and Lori, his assistant that does all the production. Really great film. And if you haven't seen it, you need to, and you need to share it, buy it for people that are questioning. And that's the whole thing. It's not that you don't have to, if you want to continue to vaccinate your children, absolutely go for it. They are your kids. Just make an informed, educated decision. Informed
Mm-hmm.
consent. When you walk into that office, there should be a document that says, I have been informed of all the contraindications and injury potential of these inoculations that I'll be injecting into your weeny, teeny, tiny baby. Love the doctor. And you sign that form. If there's any parent that has a practitioner that does that, I will be shocked. I don't think any parent has ever walked into an office and has been received informed consent, and they should.
Wow. Well, I think if everybody watches this, they'll have a little nudge. You know, somebody it's like a little nudge in the back saying, "Get over here, look at this, do this."
Well,
Because I think everybody's been so numbed. That's not a good word for this. We're numb at this point, Tracy.
yeah.
Over the last couple of years, people are numb there, and I think a lot of people are ready for it to go away, but they want it to go away, and still be compliant.
Mm-hmm.
I see people walking around now with masks. They're not even being asked to. So
That's
it's
their
done. It's
choice,
over.
Joe. That's their choice. People look at us and we don't have them, and they have the same disdain. The word is choice. That's really what it
I
is.
know.
If you're
I
informed
know.
and you make a decision to choose, that's up to them. And I,
Sure.
while I don't particularly think mass work, there's no science that has validated that. For some people, that's their safety net, and that's
That's
okay.
their safety net.
And that's okay. Same thing with vaccinations with children, and even this experimental jab that we can't really call a vaccine, their choice. But in
Yeah.
turn, I want to preserve the same rights for my kids, because I want to be the decision maker over what I put into my body and what my children put into their body. And when they're old enough to make their own decisions, I want them to retain
Right.
the choice of what they put in their body. So
Right.
it's very important that we retain all of this.
It's all about freedom. It's
It
all
it's
about freedom.
it's about liberty. I mean,
Yeah.
to
Liberty.
be able to understand what the Constitution was put into place. It's not a document that states our rights. It's a document that protects our rights. It doesn't
Correct.
give us rights. It's a document that protects the rights that we have that are inalienable, given to us by God. And so our government is in place to protect those rights, not take them from us and not tell us what we can and can't do. And even this video, it may go out a while, who knows? But then, the powers that be will take it down. I got thrown into Facebook jail for talking about fluoride and the studies that are on PubMed done by the powers that be that tell you that it's a neurotoxin and a carcinogen.
Yes.
So how is
And the
that?
tubes of
How's that
toothpaste tell you
against
right on there, don't they?
right? And the FDA warning on the toothpaste bottle, it says, call poison control is swallowed. Well, didn't I just put this in
Yeah.
my mouth? Doesn't that sound a little risky? Like, hello, wait a second. So, yeah, anyway, lots of things. The Act 1986, go get it. I told Andy yesterday, I was like, hey, I'm doing a lecture. I hope I don't botch it too much. He's like, thanks for the awareness. He's done a really, really great job on this. Anthony Fauci, like the real Anthony Fauci, written by Robert Kennedy. You got to get that book. Like, there's so much
Yes.
truth in there, and share it. I just, it's going to
Well,
take
half of the book is documentation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so he, and that should, because he, if it wasn't, He could be sued, but he's not being sued because everything in there is proven.
Mhm.
Documented. Hey,
Yeah.
give us a quick preview of the April 9th
Oh, yeah.
professional training event.
Yeah, this is actually going to be great. I'm coming to Pittsburgh and I'll be lecturing with Jamie, and we're going to be doing, the stages of life, genetic mutations. We want to really just break down, how can we stop the epigenetic expression of certain genetic issues that are constituted as genetic issues? Are they really? Right. So we're going to do all the stages from, childhood, middle age into, your golden years, even pregnancy into birth. So this is really going to be interesting because the epigenetic expression is really what we can control. Your DNA receives communication from
Mm-hmm.
all of the outside stuff, food you put into your mouth, your thoughts you think, all of that kind of stuff. However, the expression is really big. So we can biohack around these genetics and mutations with science, which is not just reserved for pharmacology, but also nutraceuticals. And Nutritional Frontiers does a great job with patented trademarked ingredients and really getting the research out there. So Jamie and I are going to break it down how to biohack around genetics through all the stages of life in April together at a professional
How
training.
many stages? 4, 5?
4 stages, 4.
4 stages. I
Yep.
think I'm the only one in the fourth.
I think I'm in, like, I don't know. I'm not sure where I am. It depends where we do the cutoff. I'll let you know.
Yeah. Do you have the timelines on there too?
Yeah, well, I think we say adulthood. I'm going to put
Yeah.
myself in that category. Although
Okay.
sometimes I feel like I'm 12. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sure you're going to discuss the difference between chronological and biological, right?
Right,
Ages.
right. That's,
Yeah.
cellular age, oxidative stress, what that
Yeah.
expression looks like. Oxidative stress
Mhm.
is just an expression. That's what it
Yeah.
is, right? When you're oxidatively stressed and your cells are aging fast, you look older. That's an expression. So I would say, like, there's physical discernment of the body. It will land on your face, whatever's wrong, and you'll know it. So,
Yeah. Well, it's been a long time. I'm glad you were back. This
me
was
too.
fun. Let's do it again soon. And I'll
Yes.
see you on April 9th for sure.
All
I will
right.
be there.
I'm
Hey,
looking
if you
forward.
want to stick around, Caroline's coming on. You can join us if you
Yeah,
want.
stick around with Caroline. I'm gonna watch her. Could be watching
Okay.
Caroline. No, I'm just kidding. She's awesome. Everybody should tune in for her. Thanks, Joe.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks to
Thanks,
Wow. Thanks,
Trace.
Jamie. I'll see you guys.
See you soon.